So yeah, we'll start getting into our time in Bali. And so if you want to hop over to the next slide. So, so just to give some basic information about just what the religious culture of Bali just looks like starting out. So we just have some basic statistics up there. So Bali is an island of about 4 million people, and so it's pretty populated for the island of its size, especially in that area. Obviously, the largest religion in Bali is Hindu, which, if you notice, is very different from the main statistic of Indonesia, where Indonesia is primarily a Muslim-dominated country. Bali stands alone, though, as kind of the bastion of Hinduism there, and that's partly just because Bali is a touristy destination, so the government leaves them alone to keep bringing in the money, and they can just keep doing what they're doing. So it's a very different part just of Indonesia as a whole. But yeah, tiny percent there of the island is reached. Just 1% is under the Christian umbrella, but when you get out of Catholicism and other non-evangelical, we're talking 0.015% of the people there actually know and love and serve the Lord. So it is a very, very, very lost island. So just to get just a mindset of what Bali looks like. So as we were talking in youth, we were talking about just the idea of Babylon, so in Revelation. So Babylon is this country that it looks very appeasing to the eyes. People love it. It's bright. It makes you feel like it will meet your desires. And Bali is honestly if you just look at it with the eyes, Bali is a very beautiful island. Incredibly beautiful architecture. Again, you can see just the temple there, just their statue work is just phenomenal. Everything is just ancient. They have ceiling tiles there that are older than America. But just just looking at it, it really is just a beautiful, beautiful country to look at. But when you start to peel back those layers of what you're looking at, it's beautiful, but it is dark. This is an island that is completely owned and dominated by just a false religion, again, worshiping demons and whatever else they can imagine. There's a God for everything, and again, they devote their entire lives to it. So while it looks beautiful, you have to remind yourself and step back that what you're looking at is anything but beautiful.
And that's reflected in the culture as well. You can see just a lot of suffering, and the government doesn't really take care of its people, and you're going to see it kind of taint all of the culture. And it's the result of not doing it God's way.
Yeah, and you can move on to the next. I think this is just more just kind of imagery of...
And this spot here is where they get their holy water, and it's a very dirty place. Like, there's just trash everywhere, and it was amazing that this was called a holy place, but it looked really rough.
Yeah. But yeah, just again, everything you see, there's holy monkeys, there's holy trees, there's holy temples, holy snakes.
Yeah, stuff we couldn't touch or be around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so everything there is holy, in a sense for them. But yeah, again, just that is not any kind of holy water I would want to be a part of. Yeah, you can move on to the next slide. I think we'll start getting into kind of our actual time there. So we landed on the evening, their evening of Saturday the 4th. That was a pretty light day. We got there pretty late. We met Thomas, experienced Balinese traffic for the first time. I have told people, especially not picking on anybody but wives, if you are someone who rides next to your husband in the car and you make this sound a lot, Bali might not be for you. And so it is, the only rule in Balinese traffic is you get where you're going. And
you move out of the way.
But yeah, so again, we just, spent some time just getting to know Thomas a little bit more, had dinner. That's just kind of what we ate that evening. Food is also dirt cheap, so that's a good thing. But you can go on next. So this is Thomas's team. So that's his family, his team. Our translators are there as well, and then some of the spouses of the team. But so this was what their worship service in on a Sunday morning looks like when they're part of a team. The way they do it, they structure it in 3 individual parts, and this is also what they model for their home churches that they're planting. So there's 3 equal parts. There's you look back, you look at the now, and then you look towards the future. So when they look back, it was very eye-opening, just their level of accountability that they have there compared to what we're used to. But that look back, it is going around the room saying, "What have you read this week? Who have you shared the gospel with? How many times did you share the gospel this week? What were their responses? What were those conversations?" And Thomas says if someone comes up and is like, "Well, I didn't really do any, I didn't really have many conversations that week," there's usually loving rebuke, but it is a rebuke of, again, then what were you spending your time doing? And so, very different from how we do it here, but seemed effective because everybody there was committed to the goal. Then they obviously take time looking at the now. They'll read through a passage of scripture. We read through John 3, Jesus' interaction with Nicodemus, and they'll spend some time fleshing that out. And then they'll look forward. They'll use based on what we just read, how are we going to apply this? How is this going to affect our ministry? How is this going to affect our mission? How are we going to apply it, essentially? And that's kind of the model that they base their home churches on. So again, it's very interpersonal. Again, we really enjoyed being a part of it. So.
Yeah, and after that, they would start with we did sing hymns too, starting off, which was, I think, great. I think it's important to do and biblically commanded. And then after all that, they would also practice their evangelism method, because they have it memorized pretty much, and they just go through the story that from Adam to Jesus. So.
Yeah, and then just that evening, we actually got to go out and for our first time, kind of just experiencing just evangelism in Bali. So yeah, we were out on a black sand volcanic beach, just talking to people. Ate some absurdly spicy corn that regretted instantly.
A lot of spicy food, and anybody who knows me, it took a while to get used to that.
But yeah, that's kind of part of it, though. So especially from our side of things, like stuff there is relatively cheap, and when things aren't busy. If you're talking to somebody, like a great just way to open up a conversation is just to go buy something from them. And then, while they're making it, because usually when you buy something, you have to wait because they're going to make it right there for you. So again, you just use that time to strike up, conversations, as they're preparing your food. And then, so it's kind of it literally cost us, like 40 cents, but it opens the door just to a good conversation to have with people. And so.
The sand here was really interesting. I saw people walking through it, and it would just coat you, and you just could not remove it. And it kind of made me think of sin and the way we try to remove our own, and it was
very black.
Yeah,
black sand.
Yeah, you couldn't remove it. But yeah, go ahead, Colin. This is.
Yeah, and so this was kind of the first kind of couple that I was able to talk with. So they actually ended up being much younger than I thought they were when I sat down. They were actually just teenagers. But yeah, Wuhan and Hilu were their names. But this was kind of my first interaction of really understanding that people here have never heard about Jesus. Again, we kind of sat down. We kind of went through their gospel presentation with them. And part of that conversation is you ask them intentionally, like, have you ever heard the story of Jesus before? And I think of all the conversations I had one person say yes, and that was because my neighbors were Christian when I was a little girl, and they told me all the time. But people know what Christians are, but nobody knows about Jesus. And so that was just kind of eye-opening for me that here's, 2 young kids, and the idea of the gospel is completely just foreign to them. And even these kids said, this is actually the first time, I guess as a child there, you're not as really as important a member of society. And so they said, no, this is the first time any stranger has ever talked to them, ever. But they seemed very just appreciative of just having someone to talk to. It was really cool.
This day I was with Daniel, one of the team members, and he's got a really interesting story. He converted later in life. He had kids with his wife while they were Hindu. He converted later, and his children do not believe. But they had more children after they were Christians, and so they're getting raised in the fear and admonition of the Lord. But his other children do not believe. And the culture there, if you're not Hindu, you're not Balinese. So it's a very hard soil to work in. Their culture is very different than the way we think. Trying to get in their mindset was very difficult for me. I'm your typical Westerner. I like logic and reason and things to make sense. And over there, it doesn't matter. What matters is what does your ancestors believe, and who are you to them? And it was difficult. But Daniel was. It was amazing watching him the first day work. He was bold and methodical and determined, and he talked to someone and shared the gospel, and then we talked about it some, and then moved on to the next guy, and he was just going at it. And it was really encouraging to see. He was dedicated.
Yeah. So second day we got to spend some time at a monkey forest. But again, this is not a typical monkey forest. It is a holy monkey forest. Again, everything there is tied to religion. They have massive offerings and ceremonies there every 6 months. The monkeys are holy. Again, it's just. But yeah, we were able to have a good couple of conversations with some people while we were here. I talked to a banana vendor. An older lady. I think she's on the next slide. But again, this lady, I think she was in her upper 70s, and again, has never heard the gospel, never heard about Jesus, knew his name, didn't know a thing about him, though. And so again, it's just a reminder just how thick the lostness is there. Yeah, there she is in orange, was the lady I was able to speak with.
Yeah. And this was an older lady that I was speaking with. I was able to buy a shirt there and be able to share the gospel with her. And that's Ryu next to me, he's one of the interns. He's a young guy, and yeah, real fervent. These people, like you can tell that they're dedicated. That it's their life. And I just spoke with Thomas yesterday, and they were able to. He really needed a new motorbike, and they actually got him a motorbike.
Oh,
so
yeah.
didn't.
Yeah, his motorbike had no headlight, and they don't have a lot of lights there.
It was sketchy.
so that's good. So he can see in the dark now.
Yeah, it was God's providence that I was able to buy a shirt there too, because unfortunately the monkeys crawl all over you, and I don't want animals crawling all over me because I know what animals do at a certain point in time. And sure enough, one peed on me, but I had another shirt, so I was able to swap out. But it was an interesting experience. Those monkeys were anything but holy, I can tell you that.
Yeah, they were vicious. They were vicious. Stole. Like I said, I bought bananas. I didn't have them for long. They were stolen. And after I was mauled, but yeah, you can move on to the next. And so this was later that afternoon. After we left the park, we just kind of went to a local park that was kind of like a community center that was under construction. The girl there with the peace sign, that's Asan. She's not with the team anymore. She was one of the interns. She was one of the most dedicated, fervent people, though, I've seen share the gospel. Anybody that was alone, she would literally run to them, and I would get there when I got there. But no. So this is Yoman. So he was a delivery driver, but he was someone, I think he was just kind of the end of some of his ropes. But no, she went and she shared the gospel with them, and you could just kind of tell stuff was clicking. This is something about this culture that Thomas reminded us of just the way that they do their offerings. So it's costing them money, like literal money. So there's daily offerings, there's weekly offerings, monthly offerings, big yearly offerings, and every bit of that costs. And so all their people here don't have savings. Everything they own goes towards these offerings, these things that go eventually to nothing, but to their minds, this is their investment. The more they offer, the more they give, the more they put forth in this life, that's building up their karma to help them to the next. Yeah. And so for them to convert it's them at finally admitting that everything I've been doing for these last 50 years means nothing. And Thomas, that's a huge hurdle for some people to cross. But no, Yoman, there said she asked if he heard the story, he said no. She's like, does it make sense? Does it make sense that God had to be the one to pay the price, that we can't buy our way towards God? And yes, that makes more sense. Do you want to believe? And he's yes. And he prayed there. That when someone does this, they do a lot of follow up with them. It's not just to pray the prayer. Okay, good, you're good to go. There is legitimate follow up, contact, try to get them within the home church. And last I talked to Thomas, Yoman was still growing and still seemed dedicated to it. So, amen.
And part of that offerings they have to do, they're also paying for their families. When they pay for their families' funerals, the more money they pay, the more likely they'll reach whatever afterlife it is. And yeah, it's just the system just keeps people down and does not promote human flourishing.
Yeah, in Bali, spiritual poverty leads to physical poverty. And so that's something Thomas reminds us of a lot. So you can move on. Yeah. And so, and then this was a memorial that we were at, the Gusti Ngura Rai. Can't say that word right, but that's what it is. So it's just kind of like our Arlington National Cemetery would be to them. It's a military cemetery for a certain battle with the British. But we went there to talk to somebody. We actually ended up being the only people there. But this day was still very fruitful, though, by the end of it.
Yeah, I was able to meet another Christian here. I only met two Christians that were not on the team. One was a Catholic on the first day, and this was the second gentleman. And he's from an island that is predominantly Protestant, and he was living in this area but didn't have a church or anywhere, so we were able to connect him with Thomas's team, and hopefully he'll be starting a home church in his area. So it was cool getting to meet one believer that wasn't on the team that we didn't know. So
yeah, you can move on to the next. So this is Wisnu, and so when me and Daniel and Rio were kind of out and about, we went to this stand to get some food and talk to a lady. Food was the only thing in Bali that was just not good. But the lady there was just, as he was sharing, she primarily spoke Balinese, so I couldn't really talk with her much because our translator knew Indonesian. But you could just tell by her body language, just from Daniel, she was very standoffish. She just really wanted nothing to do with it. But Wisnu, while we were there, she went there to buy something. But she heard Daniel talking to this other lady, and as she was leaving, she walked up to him and said, "Hey, I have a shop, mile and a half or so down the road over here. Here's the address. I would love to hear more about this." And that was cool because this, like I said, at least on my portion of the team when we were out, there was nobody there. It was one of those things where we went out and it kind of felt like a bust. But here was this lady who just, by God's providential timing, was not the lady we were talking to, just overheard part of the conversation and was like, I want to hear more. So we honored that, and so after we were done there, we drove to this lady's shop and followed up with her. And again, this lady, you could tell, was just very, very moved by the gospel. She was in tears. She realized that she was freed, freed from the oppression of Hinduism, freed from the oppression of sin. It was just an incredible experience to see how God works in that way.
Yeah, it was like it was a different kind of feeling than here in America, because everyone knows the gospel story and stuff like that. But here, the lady heard the gospel for the first time and had what appeared to be faith. And you can really see the power of hearing the gospel, the preaching of the word and hearing the gospel, transforming someone right before your eyes. It was pretty wild. Yeah. And so the way they do this process is, if they make a profession of faith, they'll follow up. They'll do some initial discipleship stuff, explain what baptism is, and if all that makes sense and they're ready to commit, then they'll pursue baptism at that point. Mm-hmm. And typically it's going to be Daniel, who was the one who witnessed her, he'd be the one baptizing her. Thomas intentionally does it so that way the Balinese are baptizing each other. Mm-hmm. And doing home church together, and he's really trying to make it where they're not relying on a Westerner to build the church. Because if he ever has to leave or whatever, there's a possibility the church would just fall apart. But he's establishing local leaders, and it's a really good method of way he's doing it, it looks like.
Yeah. Yeah, you can move on. So, this is the Wednesday. We went up to kind of just a mountain village. We were able to have a few conversations with some people that day. I spoke with a lady also named Katut. She was just a vendor of a farmer. Again, just never heard. The gospel was foreign to her. Balinese people are very polite, but they do it very rudely, and you don't, because that's just their culture. So
it's polite to them, rude to us.
Yeah, and so we were talking to her, we were asking her, because she wasn't super interested, but we always ask, hey, do you have any contact information? Someone could follow up with you if you have questions, talk about it more. And as she was texting somebody on her phone, she said, "Oh, I don't have any contact information." Loud and clear, got it. It's just it's kind of just there, but that's politer than saying no, or I'm not going to give you my contact information. It's just to lie to your face and be like, I don't have it, as I'm on my phone. Just a different culture, but again, it's just their way of being polite, sort of, not really.
Yep, and just a little note on the previous day, I got to speak with a gentleman who was another vendor, and some of these moments you kind of realize how hard it is to share the gospel through a translator. I really appreciate Thomas's knowledge of the language and his ability to talk directly to people, because it was challenging. But the other thing they do that is kind of different than America is they don't really leave or tell you to go away. They just kind of stop talking or try to change the subject. And if anybody knows me, whenever I'm talking to somebody, I try to force them into a conversation. And I found out that I made my translators a little uncomfortable, but I think it was for their benefit too. That sometimes you just need to keep on going, just press in. So, but it was a cool experience. And here's a couple of a priest and a priestess. This was super interesting. I didn't talk as much. I let Thomas do most of the talking here. I try to add a few things, but whenever I was talking, it was really difficult for the translator to kind of put in some of my thoughts, because this was one of the deeper, I'm going to say quote unquote deeper conversations, but it was almost as if they didn't really know what they believed either, but because they're supposed to be the religious leaders, they had to come up with answers for Thomas's questions. And there's no systematic faith here. This Hinduism is very different than Indian Hinduism. It's very animistic and pantheist. There's gods everywhere. There's different ways to get righteous. I met one guy who says you go into a temple and you crack an egg and that makes you righteous. And I saw another guy who you go and they sacrifice a chicken and that makes you righteous. So there's just no way to know whether or not your sins are forgiven or not. And I don't understand a lot of the stuff he says, because the translator didn't understand a lot of the stuff the priest was saying. So it was a cool interaction, but again, with such a language barrier, it was difficult, because there's multiple languages in Indonesia. Bahasa Indonesian is the primary, which everyone speaks. Then you have your local dialects, which is here would be Balinese, and our translators didn't speak any Balinese. So sometimes it's difficult.
Yeah, and so this was later that evening, and so this is actually one of the most holy places in all of Bali. So yeah, it's the Tanah Lot Temple. Outside there's just tons and tons of markets. It's a very touristy area. Just people go here for the tourism. This is where they had the holy snakes also that you could go look at and touch and stuff. However, so this is kind of a hard thing I think to just explain. So this was the only place I've been to where just being there seemed to kick up just that adrenaline, that fight or flight thought. again, this is their most holy place, on the island. You get underneath, there's a spring where you can get, holy water. Only certain priests are allowed on that island. The only thing I can explain the feeling that I had was there's something else residing on that island. It is, if we just think that false religions are worshiping nothing, I think we need to check our mindset. They're not worshiping nothing. There is demonic influences behind all religions. Spiritual warfare is absolutely real. And yeah, I did not like this place. Just talking about it, like I'm getting it was weird. I've never experienced anything like it. This place was just such a touristy attraction. Was evil. It's the only word I could use to describe it. Just wicked.
Yeah. We wanted God to just take that island. Just sweep it under the ocean. This was that outside that temple, kind of the touristy areas. You can see the detail in that architecture was amazing. But we just happened to pass this guy just doing a painting of Jesus, and we're like, well, if this isn't an opportunity to share the gospel, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
So we came up to this gentleman and said, do you know like what you're painting, who this is, and what's going on? And he didn't know. And Asan, she shared the gospel with him and had a very detailed. There's a couple other paintings of Jesus in there, but there's also Hindu religious paintings, and they were able to exchange contact information. And so hopefully, God changed him. But I don't know the end of that story.
Yeah, and not a whole lot to say here. This was kind of just an offish day for us. We were able to go to
break day.
Yeah, break day. We went to a very, very beautiful beach. Went snorkeling. Josh lost his wedding ring swimming, and as I found that out, I was like, oh, this will be a good moment to make fun of Josh. So I held up my hand to show off my wedding ring, but it was also gone. So don't go snorkeling with your wedding ring, I guess.
Yeah, I felt mine come off. I knew it was gone.
Nope, did not.
Yeah, that one snuck past him. Colin did, and Colin's defense, it was a rough day for Colin out there in the water, I think.
So, yeah, apparently snorkeling with a mask with any kind of mustache doesn't work well. I breathe in a lot of seawater,
So here is a Toots family. They actually have stayed in touch some with me since I've been in the States. They've reached out to me some. I don't know where they're all at. The gentleman on the end, on the left side here, he had a lot of good questions. He seemed very interested. I'm standing right next to Katut here, and I think that's his... I can't remember who that. I think it's his brother-in-law or something, and his wife. But they were a sweet family. We just got to spend time with them together. The home's really interesting. They have like a living room outside, like on a patio, and you just kind of hang out there. And this is another gentleman we met who he spoke a little bit of English and was able to talk a little bit in some English with him. But again, it was one of those ones where he was not interested in what I was sharing, and they would just kind of turn their head and things like that. And Thomas later said, yeah, like that's a sign that they're kind of done talking. But I didn't let him slide. I kept on going after him. So Lord willing, he'll think about the things that we said.
Yeah. And just for context, Katut, the one there next to Josh, that's a member of Thomas's team.
Yes.
And so.
That's one of the oldest Christians in his team,
Mm-hmm.
who has worked with other missionaries before Thomas.
Yeah. And so definitely the oldest. And so he was a great guy though. We all love Katut.
Yeah, and I think he was kind of blind, right?
Yeah, he was. Yeah. He's partially blind, and so, but still faithful to go out and share. So, even blindness is not a excuse there for not being faithful. So, you can go on to the next slide. So, this is a part of Katut's other family. So the guy in red there is his brother. That's the pathway there. Like that's kind of their streets, where they to get into the homes. But yeah, his brother was very, very inquisitive. We had a lot of good conversation, but he was the only person there that seemed to actually almost have a somewhat like Western mindset, the way so as you would share the gospel, he would stop and be like, well, how do you know? Like, who wrote this down? Like, how do you know this is true and Hinduism isn't true? So he was just very, very inquisitive, but not like in a rude kind of way. Just he was very actually just curious. Like, this is a very bold truth claim. What are you backing it up on? And so yeah, we got to spend quite a while sharing with him. I was able to share with another couple this day. I didn't get any pictures of them, but it was the experience where you could truly see just how their religion impacts just their lifestyle, their poverty. This was a much older couple. He had some pretty severe issues, like with his legs. I met him because his wife was out doing her daily offering, in the morning, and burning some coconut shells. And we kind of stopped and talked to him, and they actually invited us into their home, gave us some super strong coffee. But just through that conversation, you could tell just their home was pretty destitute. It was definitely falling apart. They kept apologizing for just the status of their house, and now it's not really up to standards. But the reason they said is like, we just don't have any money. They said, her aunt died, a couple years ago. She had no family, so it was up to them to pay for the funeral, and I think it cost around $3,500 American dollars, which is 50-ish million of theirs. So they have to borrow the money and they have to pay it back, and there's really at that point just no escape, just from the poverty. But at the same time, though, it was really one of those things where, like, man, these are the people who need to hear. These are people who are just literally enslaved, just to financial debt, to sin debt, and just it was just a sweet opportunity to be able to just tell these people, just, hey, there is no debt that you have to pay. Christ is the one who paid that debt for you. And they listened to the whole thing. They had a lot of questions, but when we got to the point of asking, like, do you believe this? I think his response to his wife was like, woman, don't you have to do something at the temple? And then kind of kicked us out. And so, but which was just really disheartening, because just you're there and just you see these people, and you see them as these are people made in the image of God who are lost to their sin, who are just enslaved to something, and you have the hope. And so yeah, it's discouraging when their response is just like, get out of my house, we got to go do these offerings that aren't doing anything. But again, we trust the Lord, and again, the Lord will call his people to his own.
And that's part of what Thomas tries to teach as well. He shares the gospel with his team, but he also teaches just concepts of saving and trying to provide for your family and all these things, because their whole culture has been based around an island that they've never really had to save anything. They've always had food. They have everything they need at all the times, and they have no concept of saving. And if their relatives come up and ask for money, they're obligated to give their relatives money. And what he's trying to teach them is, up in the North in America, you have to save up your firewood. And if your family comes say, hey, I didn't save firewood, let me take yours, you're going to kill your family by giving it to them. And trying to just teach that concept that, it's hard in their context, spiritually and just functionally.
Yeah, yeah. So kind of like I said, they don't have any concept of earthly savings. All their savings is spiritual for them, and so we move on to the next. I think that's it. And so, yeah, and so that's the last slide. So we just wanted to talk a little bit just about, so what does this all mean, just for us? So again, we spent a week out there. We got to know the culture, got to know the people. So when I think of Bali, there is a text that comes to my mind, and so I want to read to you guys out of Matthew 9, starting in verse 35. And Jesus went throughout all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom and healing every disease and every affliction. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion for them, because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore pray earnestly to the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into the harvest. And so it's something Thomas reminded us of. There's not tons of evangelical mission work just in Bali. And so that was one of the prayers that he gave to us, is just that we would pray just for, again, just the laborers to go out. Obviously he wants to raise up the Balinese people to reach the Balinese people. But, the laborers are few, and it's just the way that culture works. It is the harvest is just extremely ripe. But also, just another thing I think both of us took away is lostness is lostness. It doesn't matter if it's lostness in Bali or if it's lostness in Harrison County. We might not have the temples, we might not have the daily offerings, we might not have, our religion doesn't look the same as theirs. But the people of Harrison County worship gods just as much as the Balinese people do. Ours just tend to look like whatever stares back at us from the mirror. People here are still investing, this idea of good works, absent of Jesus. You see that in Scripture that, at the last day, people will come to Jesus when he's cast them away, saying, like, Lord, did I not do all these things in your name? And so these are also Christians saying this to people who supposedly were Christians, saying, like, look at everything we did. Look at all this investment we made for you. And Jesus says, depart from me, for you worker of iniquity, for I never knew you. And so it's easy to go to Bali and understand that as missions work. And we would definitely encourage anybody to go to Bali if you get the opportunity, but you don't have to be in Bali to do missions work. There's plenty of lostness here in Harrison County. It's the same lostness, it just looks different. So we would also just encourage anybody here who's hearing this, you may have heard about Jesus, unlike the Balinese people, since the day you were a child. But are you investing in your good works? Are you investing in something else other than Jesus, or are you putting your faith in Jesus, the only one who can meet the demands of sin for us? Because if you haven't, the response you need is the same. The need that you have is the same need of the Balinese people. Their culture may look different, but they need Jesus. We need the same Jesus.
Yeah. So. What's our religious context? What are you putting your faith in? Is it your church attendance? Is it your offerings to God? Is it your good works? And we just really want to encourage everyone to evaluate themselves and what's the object of your faith, and really evaluate that. And secondly, what are you doing about your faith? It was very encouraging to see these people giving everything to share the gospel every day to multiple people, to strangers, complete and total strangers. And I just encourage all of us to do the same. It's really not hard to strike up conversation with people. You can start with small talk or buy something from someone and quickly move into the gospel. Mm-hmm. So we just encourage everyone to evaluate these things in your own lives.
Yep. So, lastly, we would just encourage anybody who just, again, feels I know we would like to send another team to Bali. I know me and Josh would like to go back in a couple of years ourselves. But again, just pray towards that direction. Begin investing, saving aside for it now if it's something you feel like you're interested in. But even more so than that, just Thomas and Gwen just always need support. Not just from churches, but from individuals. And so we'd like to get that plug in there for them. I know we have some of their stuff out in the lobby that kind of shows how to support them. Again, the work that they're doing is fantastic. It's gospel-centered, which in Bali is, even among missionaries, is pretty rare. So again, we would just encourage anybody who feels led that way. Again, you can support them as individuals. I know we do as a church, but every little bit helps towards them. So again, we just want to thank you guys for the chance to talk and speak. If you have any questions, me and Josh would love to talk about it for another 2 hours, but Keith will yell at us. So, but thank you guys, and